Hello and welcome to the Scottish Mountain Bike Gathering 2020. I'm Graham McLean, I'm the head of developing mountain biking in Scotland, and I'm delighted to be joined by three panellists today, which for one of the sessions that I'm especially looking forward to today. I think this session is looking at, and we know that there's as a result of COVID, the bike sales have gone through the roof. There's going to be so many more people accessing our sport, coming into our sport, enjoying it and looking to use the outdoors. That is going to have an impact though. So how do we begin this conversation into how do we start to look at getting those people into sport, keeping them in our sport, keeping them being active, keeping them enjoying it, but not having and trying to minimise our cumulative impact into the outdoors through promotion of responsible access. And today I'm delighted by joining by three panellists who I think will give us great insight into this and really help us begin this discussion and help frame our education going forward, I hope. So I'll introduce our panellists now, or actually I'll give you their name and I'm sure they can introduce themselves. So first of all, I'm going to go to Bridget Finton from NatureScot. Bridget, can you introduce yourself and a bit of background to NatureScot as well, please?
So do you want my whole kind of introduction or just a wee snippet for now?
Go a wee snippet and then we'll go around everybody with wee snippets and then we'll do the whole one.
Right, you are. So yeah, Bridget Finton, I work for NatureScot, formerly known as Scottish Natural Heritage. We're a government agency established, from in the early 90s. Our remit is essentially nature conservation, landscape and public enjoyment. And I work within the People and Places team. I'm a national policy and advice officer, and I work near one of our offices. Well, yes, I work in one of our offices, which is near Perth, but clearly working at home at the moment. So the kind of things that I'm involved in are issues to do with the recreation and access to the outdoors. I've worked with developing mountain biking in Scotland for quite a number of years because we funded the establishment of DMB in S. But at the moment, most of my time is spent developing NatureScot's health agenda, and we are the lead government agency developing an initiative called our Natural Health Service. So there in a nutshell is who I am and where I come from.
Brilliant, thanks Bridget. That's really useful. I'm not sure it was the short snippet, but you got there. And our other panelists today, Aoife Glass and Stephen journalist. Aoife, can you give us a bit of an introduction to yourself? And let's not worry about it being wee or big. Just let it flow, and we'll see where it gets to.
Hi everyone. So my name is Aoife. I'm a mountain bike journalist and freelance content creator. I produce content. I write for a number of different titles in the UK, including MB UK, BikeRadar.com, Wide Open Magazine, SingleTracks.com, Cycling Plus, T3, Fit and Well, Huck Magazine. Prior to that, I was deputy editor of Total Women's Cycling and women's editor on BikeRadar.com. And before that, I used to work at the Natural History Museum in public engagement and education.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Aoife. Great introduction. And over to yourself, Phil.
Hi, can you hear me, Graham? Yeah?
Yeah.
Great. So yeah, I'm Phil Whitfield. I'm the National Visitor Services Manager with Forestry and Land Scotland. I've been involved in mountain bike developments and management for many, many years, more years than I'd care to remember, I suppose. Along with Graham, I sit on the National Access Forum as well. Yeah, very keen to be involved in this session, so thanks.
Great. Yeah, I think what we'll do is we'll just go into the sort of body of the chat today, and as I mentioned in the kind of intro as well there, I think we have seen a number of people selling bikes. I think our trail centres have seen a real increase in the number of users. I think our wider countryside and our parks have seen a lot more people walking and on bikes. So how do you think we're going to maintain this momentum, and how will we continue to increase participation in our sport? I'll go first to Phil from Forestry and Land Scotland. What's your take on this?
Well, I think it's been a really eventful year. It's been a challenging year for many of us managing recreation sites. Of course, it's been a challenging year for the whole world. But yeah, for managing a huge boost in visitor numbers has been really stretching for our teams. But yeah, we're now starting to draw breath, and I think we've really got to take the positives out of what has been an exceptional year in access to the countryside. As you say, so many people have started to walk, bike, enjoy the outdoors in ways that either they never did before, or that they're doing in greater numbers or for more time. So absolutely, I think we need to maintain the momentum. This is really good news for people's health and well-being. It's really good news for the local visitor economies around Scotland. And absolutely, we need to continue to welcome them. There's lots of sort of work going on just now to sort of figure out what we need to do to basically manage all the visitor pressures. I was just on the call, the one in for the previous session on Fort William, and of course camper vans came up there. There's many things that are needing to be looked at in terms of managing the visitor pressures more generally that are not bike specific, but bikers arrive in places often in vehicles. Active travel obviously is a really important thing. We want to try and get people using their local forests and outdoor spaces more often as well. But yeah, I think if there is a sort of key message, it is that we've got to make our sites accessible and attractive to new users and to folk that are just coming into the sport. The folks like me and Graham, who are old crusties who have been riding our bikes for many years, we're not the target audience. We've got to remember that, the sort of challenges that new users coming to the sport, they're not new. We've been thinking about entry-level experiences before, but I think 2020 really makes us focus really closely on those entry-level experiences, because for the sport to thrive, it needs to be recruiting new users. It's not all about looking after folks that have been at it for years and are at the top end of their game. So yeah, just double underlines the need to look at entry-level experiences and look after those people in their early years of coming into the sport. And not everybody's got a load of money to spend. So, we're not talking about folk with really plush bikes and the ability to perhaps get individual coaching sessions. We're going to make it really easy and accessible for people.
That's great. And Aoife, just the same sort of question onto yourself.
I mean, I think most of us have seen huge increases of people out on the trails, not just on the trails, but in your local woods, on your local bridle paths. And I've seen every conceivable age of rider, every conceivable state of bike. There's been bikes that have clearly not seen the light of day in a shed for the last, let's not even think about how many years, people are dragging out and starting to use, which is fantastic to see. And so I think that we've got this sudden influx of people who are looking for something to do that was outdoorsy, something that would give perhaps their families, an activity that they could all do together, or perhaps it's groups of friends who would normally do something else and they're now riding together. If we want to keep those numbers, we need to find out what it is that they need what they need and want from the experience. What are they looking to achieve from their riding experience? What do they need to know? What don't they know currently that would improve their experience? But I think also there's a question there about the people that maybe aren't coming yet. So if we want to grow this, we need to find out, okay, well, who are the groups that we're not seeing out here? Why are we not seeing them here? And how can we reach them as well? So there's an opportunity here to address some of the diversity and equality questions as well within mountain biking, as well as welcoming the people who've already discovered it into the fold.
Great. And on to yourself, Bridget, and then I'm going to come back and just probably ask a little further question just based on what Aoife was saying there. But on to yourself, Bridget, maintaining momentum and continuing to grow.
Okie dokie. Well, as I mentioned, part of NatureScot's remit is encouraging people to enjoy the outdoors. We advised Scottish Government on access legislation, gosh, and that came into effect in the early 2000s. And this is such a fantastic advantage that Scotland has in terms of the right of responsible access. So it means that, well, lockdown arrived and people were able through our access legislation to explore and use and enjoy and get benefit from taking exercise outdoors. It's absolutely brilliant to see that increase in use. And it's I'm sure a reflection of a shift from indoor sport and exercise to the outdoors, and especially local places and spaces. And I think that's for many people, that's ignited a greater appreciation of their local green spaces and places and access networks that they're discovering, and also a greater appreciation of the personal benefits that taking visits to the outdoors, those benefits that arise in terms of physical and mental health. NatureScot's been surveying use of the outdoors from just after relaxation of the main lockdown period. So the basic headline stat is that the survey that we undertook in September of this year, 80% of adults said that they'd visited the outdoors at least once a week during that survey period. And that compares with 64% visiting the outdoors at least once a week that were recorded in August of last year. So clearly a significant increase, and those new users, primarily walking and cycling. We have picked up in some of the survey work that there have been some unfortunate consequences of perhaps new users, used to taking their exercise maybe indoors or team sports, and NatureScot was tasked with leading a working group which pulled together the main environmental agencies and Sport Scotland, and we were tasked with coordinating messages about responsible behaviour. But those messages were also very much about encouraging more use and clearly taking advantage of access legislation, the fantastic managed sites, but also wider countryside. And but yeah, those messages about responsible use, not leaving litter, are very important to get across. I should perhaps say that working group that I mentioned, I'm told there were no significant concerns raised in terms of mountain biking usage, which was really heartening. And I put credit to Developing Mountain Biking in Scotland a lot for helping us to put those messages about enjoy the outdoors, but yes, don't cause problems in doing so. So good credit to you, team.
That's good to hear, and we'll explore some of those just if there has been negative impacts in a minute. But I think actually I quite like the Aoife's kind of some of the questions that you raised there as well, and looking at this from a real sort of person-centered perspective as well, and looking at it for new people coming in, or a little bit of if we know people who haven't come into the sport yet, if we're looking at them, do we have any insights, either through your publications and things, or through Bridget and Phil, through your organisations as well? Do we have any insights as to what experiences those new people are looking for and doing? it could be a range, but I'm happy to explore that. Just so that there's sort of, because I think there's a danger, like Phil says, of people who have been in it for a while, to imagine that everybody's looking for the same experiences that they're in, and slightly forgetting where they started a little bit because it was so long ago. Apologies, Phil. But anyway, yeah, back into that person-centred approach as well, Aoife. Do you have any insights through your magazines on that?
So it's an interesting one. I think this is going to come up again later when we're talking about communicating messages. Much as I love the magazines I work for, they are very much catering pretty much to an established market. They're catering to people who are already into mountain biking, immersed in the culture and in the community of mountain biking, and probably kind of already know most of this sort of information and best behavior that we want people to display. Whether or not they follow it, that's another question. For new users, I mean, we're potentially talking about people who don't necessarily even know that what they're riding is called a mountain bike, that the thing they're riding on is called a trail, that there are these things called trail centres where you can go and ride your mountain bike, a bit like I guess like a ski resort almost, only for mountain bikes, and what you do when you get there. So there's a lot of in sort of general media, you're seeing more and more articles all over the place, mainstream media, fitness and health media, saying things like, oh, you know, it's lockdown, it's really important to get out and get outside, get some fresh air, it will boost your mental health, your physical health. Excuse me. And that's great. So, and everyone goes, okay, what can I do? I've got my bike, I'll go ride my bike. And yeah, hopefully they'll sort of Google places to ride my bike, and it might come up with a trail centre, or, you know, in Scotland, because you have that wonderful access, you can pretty much ride it anywhere, which is fantastic. But I feel like maybe that next step isn't being catered for, that really, as you mentioned it before, that really essential information of what do I do when I get there? What do I expect? What do I need to bring with me? You know, is there going to be facilities? Are there going to be facilities for my kids? Can I get a sandwich? Are there bins? That, you know, what do I need to bring to look after myself and the environment I'm riding in while I'm there? And I don't think that mainstream bike media caters to that. I know from the various women's outdoors and adventure groups that I follow on social media, so very grassroots levels, and through some of the cycling, again, mostly women's cycling groups that I follow on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, that there are more questions of, the questions that are coming up are, I want to take my kids for a bike ride, where can I go? You know, how do I find out where to ride with my bikes? What do I need to bring with me to do that? I want to go and sort of meet my friends. Where can we ride? So I think if we want to sort of get some of these messages across, we can't rely on traditional media, traditional bike media. It has a place within it, but that can't be the only method we use, because it's not going to reach these new users.
Yeah, and Phil and Bridget, have we? I mean, I guess it's quite a tricky kind of subject to explore. But do we have any insight into that kind of what those new users are like looking for, or what they're doing? And Phil, have you seen increased usage at your sites, and are any feedback from that?
Yeah, we have, but I think that, you know, the survey work that NatureScot have done this year is really powerful, and I think we, you know, because people have had to stay local. That has meant that they've explored their local environment and their local forest, particularly, perhaps more than they would have done otherwise. But also, you know, being local means that, you know, it makes the sport much more inclusive. So I think, you know, if we take the view that everybody starts at the trail centre, I think that's not been the experience of this year. People have got out on their bike into their woods and have just started doing something. So yes, they might now visit a trail centre in the future and develop their skills and their sport. But I think we've got to start where people start. And I would agree with what, you know, just been said about, you know, thinking about where people go for their information. You know, we know that some of the problem behaviours we've had in the countryside, not to do with biking this year, but other behaviours, you know, those sort of audiences are not going to the NatureScot and Scottish Outdoor Access Code website. You know, that's not where they find their information. So we've got to go to where they're getting their information. But I think, you know, we need to just go with the grain of this. I think there's a danger that people that we stress the need that we need to educate people. Well, actually, you don't need much education to get out there on your bike and start enjoying it. We aren't seeing problems with people riding their bikes in greater numbers this year. We're seeing only real benefits. So I think, you know, let's go with the grain. Let's make this, build on the success that we've had this year. And it is, I think, then all about progression. So folk have started out on a bike. How do we encourage them to develop their love of biking and mountain biking in particular? That's really the next step, I think. And so entry-level experiences at trail centres is important. But just encouraging cycling generally, I think, is really important. As the UCI comes along, you know, that's another great initiative to try to, and it's of course not just about the 2023, it's about 3 years before as well. So how do we build on what we've had from 2020 towards 2023, encourage people through active travel? Any way to get on a bike is good. So I think it's one of the big successes of this year. And I think if we may be too keen to sort of look for problems and the need to educate people, but I don't really see huge impacts from new users that are anything other than good.
Yeah, and from yourself, Bridget, as well. Phil mentioned as well the sort of survey work that's been done, and I think you mentioned it as well there as well. Has there been insights into what people are looking for from those experiences as well, and possibly what even they might look for in the future? Do we no one understand that? One more of that.
I'm not sure that the survey work is going to enlighten us hugely on that. We certainly asked whether respondents had come across any issues of concern. From memory, the only one that I can think of relating to cycling was concern about people cycling on pavements. So clearly not sort of in the great outdoors, but my take on what people are looking for, what people need. Well, I will continue to make the point that the knowledge that you are in the outdoors by legal right is extremely important. You know, that was one of the founding sort of rationales for our access legislation, because until that point, people just weren't sure, am I allowed to be here? Am I allowed to do this? So I think there is an absolute fundamental need from our side to make people aware that we do have access legislation. Yes, rights come with responsibilities, but in essence, yes, people are allowed to go there. So a knowledge of access rights, infrastructure, in terms of, yeah, access networks, Phil was saying, yeah, primarily close to home is what people have discovered, and it's such a fantastic resource. It also spreads the load, staying local. So infrastructure, information, and good experiences that build people's confidence, especially the new users. In terms of where people access information, Phil has probably not heard this stat, but our web analytics show that the Scottish Outdoor Access Code website received, between April and August, we received an amazing 360,000 web page views, which was up 67% on the same period the previous year. So people were looking for guidance on where can I go, what am I allowed to do, and we absolutely cranked up our communications effort in terms of getting across messages about the code, but also some specific COVID related messages. But I think going to, well, Sport Scotland and the governing bodies of sport is also a really, really important source of information.
Yeah, no, that's good. And yeah, we've been the same. We've definitely seen a lot more increase in our web traffic as well. Not sure it's 67%, but certainly a lot more people have been coming in and looking for information, looking for definitive information as well, which I think is important. And I just going into that as well, I think I don't really want to cover ground in terms of the negative impact of this. I think both yourself, Bridget, and Phil have said that actually we haven't seen it. We've just seen the real benefits of doing it and things as well. However, do you think that there could be, just imagining ourselves going forward, and particularly probably into next spring as well, particularly if we get a nice one, and and these are all lining up a range of good things here that could happen, but we get a nice spring, and we get a reduction in the spread of the virus and things, and we see a lot more people, which I think it could happen as well, accessing our bounce. Do you think there's a danger of a sort of a cumulative impact of that, and some stresses and strains, and particularly as people's confidence builds, they start to move into wider areas and start to go further and longer? Is there risks for that as well, or is there more opportunities as well? So, Aoife, I'll pick you up first for that one.
So I would say I should just, as a little disclaimer, point out that I'm not in Scotland at the moment. I'm down in the southwest, and so obviously my local experience of lockdown is different to what everyone in Scotland has been experiencing. And I would say that there have been a few negatives from lockdown, mostly due to things like the fact that the sheer numbers of people have meant that the infrastructure has struggled. With sort of trail centres, so you have huge numbers coming to the trail centres, car parks are overwhelmed, and then riders are sort of moving out more into the forest itself. We don't have the same access legislation, so there have been a few issues around that in the Forest of Dean. But overall, it's been great to see many more people cycling. I think one of the issues / opportunities that sort of is something that we need to look at now before it becomes a problem cumulatively, and this is sort of switching more to trail mode, and again, I don't know if the situation is the same for you. I volunteer with the local trail building and volunteer crew, and because of the lockdowns, we have seen a massive decrease in our funding, which is normally through donations, and also we haven't been able to dig because we're in lockdown, so we can't go out and do it. And we've got a lot more traffic on the trails. So we're having a bit of a situation where the trails are eroding a bit faster and we're not able to keep up with maintaining them. So, there is a question around how do we manage that going forward if we've got these greater numbers, which I would love to see. I'd love to have more people staying in the sport, more people discovering the outdoors, more people getting into mountain biking. How do we make sure that again, from a built trail perspective, that the infrastructure is there to make sure they can access it, that their trails are in good condition and safe for them to use if we're talking about built trails, and that they have all the information they need to go ride safely and sustainably. I mean, picking up with some of the comments that Phil made, you're right. I think we can sort of get bogged down into this. Oh, what's the right way to do it? What are the rules you need to know? Like, oh, don't be a naughty mountain biker. When actually it's more about giving people the knowledge they have to sort of have the best experience for themselves. And that, I think most people don't want to cause harm. They want to just have a good time and enjoy the environment. And if they know how to do that, they'll do it.
Great. And just, I guess as well, just on that, Phil, do you have concerns managing quite a few trail centres, and you have those green and blue experiences and there's easy to moderate ones there. Do you have any concerns around the maintenance of that? And is that something that concerns forestry?
Yeah, I mean, just picking up on a couple of things that others have said first. And I think, there is an infrastructure problem. I said that sort of earlier, I think, that, generally visitors, not just biking visitors, but there is an infrastructure problem in Scotland. And some of the hotspots particularly have been really straining this year. So, but that's not a bike specific issue. But it does need to be addressed, and we're working with other parts of government to address that. Mr. Ewing who you heard from earlier, is very supportive of trying to address those issues. So yes, an increase in visitors does create strain on the system, but an increase in people getting into the sport, it has got to be, you know, welcomed. And but yeah, just coming back to your actual question, Graham, you know, are we concerned about maintenance costs and our ability for trail centres to adapt and particularly to focus on entry-level users? Yes, absolutely. You know, that piece of infrastructure is creaking, and you know, our resources are limited. So our ability to actually respond in terms of additional facilities is very small at the moment. So yes, there is a concern there, but you know, DMB&S is doing great work with your strategy to, you know, to prioritise those audiences as well. And we were doing that prior to COVID. I think COVID is just, if you like, just been a catalyst to double underline the importance of that.
No, I'd agree with that as well. And just moving on a little bit, I guess, then away from that kind of impact bit, and also just into that communication bit. There is, I think you've touched up as well, it's got to be done right. I think you must be educated doesn't really educate anyone. It sort of probably has the opposite impact, I think. So just, you know, Bridget, you mentioned before as well that the access code had a lot of hits to its website as well. And is there ways that we are looking and to do and we are seeing being effective in terms of educating people on the rights, but also the responsibilities as well for access to the site?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's helpful to say that NatureScot has a program, a communications program that has absolutely cranked up in terms of promoting the code. We work with the National Access Forum in terms of the overall sort of steer, thinking about priority audiences, priority behaviours that need good, clear messaging. And there's definitely plans afoot to think about. I think young people is a key target audience for us at the moment, and we're developing plans for further communications. But an important principle in terms of how we've promoted the code over the years is that we absolutely want to work with partners, with appropriate organisations who know the right language to use, the right tone, thinking, you know, about segmenting the user group, perhaps, you know, from newbies to family use, young people. So yeah, we're very, very keen to work with and through the governing bodies of sports and networks that are able to communicate directly to the groups that we'd like to help. And I think it is about helping people to make decisions about, is this the right thing to do at this time, at this location? So yeah, communications need to be pitched at the right level to help people know what to look for. Okay, an individual going to a place thinking, oh, well, it's just me and I just come here, you know, once in a blue moon. But yeah, it is possible to kind of give more guidance about, well, it is just you this time, but lots of people have been before and lots of people will come after. So yeah, maintenance of access networks has been a constant issue. And it's a real tough nut to crack. But I think the point is being made better nowadays, that investment is needed that recognises the multiple benefits, not just in terms of health and well-being, but yeah, well, when COVID has hopefully run its course, rural economies as well, and yeah, community cohesion in rural areas. So yeah, multiple reasons to continue to invest. I think Fergus Ewing mentioned the Rural Investment Fund, Infrastructure Fund. So yeah, hopefully will be.
We would echo that kind of need for investment and into local areas as well as those kind of tourism hotspots as well, which we do with local people too as well. Just staying on the communications piece as well, and I'm just wondering, Aoife, as well, because as a freelance journalist, and you mentioned the need to get into mainstream press, do you think as well? I think I often find that the mainstream isn't interested until things become mainstream, and I think with the numbers we're now getting, do you think that, or have you seen an interest from the mainstream media in this, and is that something that we will see more of? And also as well, just slightly off to the side of mainstream as well, there's definitely how do we best use technology apps as well, Commute and Trailfox and other ones, do they do enough and things as well? So a bit of mainstream and a bit of new technology, Aoife.
Yeah, so there have been an increasing number of articles on the mainstream. So far, slightly more generically aimed around cycling. So I've seen some, for example, really popular women's magazines have talked about the benefits of cycling. And one of the things they've said is, oh, you could go mountain biking or you could go road cycling. So this is coming up more and more. And yeah, I mean, because of the huge numbers, that will grow. I think we will see more coverage. And whether that's sort of more generic sort of adventure outdoors content sort of linked in with other articles of ways to experience the outdoors, or whether you have specific articles looking at, mountain biking. I think that's going to be coming, and it's going to come soon. And sort of media coverage through other channels as well. With regards to sort of new technology and apps, I think when we're thinking of communicating with people, and this is something that Bridget's talked about, you kind of you need to know who the people are, where they tend to get their information from, and then but you also need to sort of, if we want to get an important message like this across, use as many different channels as possible, because the more people encounter that message in different ways, the more likely they are to take it on board. So absolutely, I think, I mean, we have all these guiding maps like Trailfox and Strava and Commute, and I think that yes, there's a question there about whether or not if you're guiding someone towards these areas, you have responsibility to provide information about how to use those areas in a better way. I think Commute have done a lot of associated content around that, so they tend to sort of describe a route, and I think that's something that could come into route descriptions. But you've also got, I mean, if you're talking about ways people are enabled to visit these places, things like retailers, like if you buy a bike, and I know this only really works with new bikes, but if you've bought a mountain bike, surely some information at that point as well, like, okay, you've got a mountain bike, here's how to ride a mountain bike, not necessarily teaching people how to ride a mountain bike, but here's what you need to do to have the best experience when riding a mountain bike. There's another point of entry there. And then there's the, you could do interesting things with like literally app venues where you have QR codes that allow you to have a little visual pop-up on, here's your map, so you've got it with you, and here's some, the 5 things you need to do to have the best experience at a trail centre. And I know it can be a little bit of a controversial one, but then using people who are maybe not your traditional users, but are the people who representative of the people who are now coming to those trail centres. So influencers, YouTubers, Instagrammers. There's a great example of a chap on YouTube called Dad's Lab, who during lockdown got into cycling, and he's been taking his kids out riding bikes. And that is a perfect direct route into what could be one of the key groups of people who are now discovering mountain biking and getting out there and riding bikes and enjoying what we have to offer, what we have to experience here.
That's great. And I guess Bridget and maybe Phil, if he's still here. Oh, there he is. Yep, he's back. Back in darker than ever. Just, I guess, picking up on a couple of bits that Aoife said there as well, just around about do we work well enough to get those things integrated well enough, good messages and how to use your mountain bike when you buy a bike as well? Could we work better? And also, when people visit trail centres, do they get that information easily and readily, or could we improve that as well? So, do we work well enough at communicating at the centres we're at? Probably more a Phil question. And also, Bridget, do we work well enough with the industry so that we can work together to promote good messages and ultimately grow our sport? I'll go Bridget with the first bit, and then Phil with the trail centre bit. Sorry.
Not sure that I'm going to be able to contribute hugely because, yes, NatureScot has a communications team that are much more able and aware of the multitude of communications methods and media. But I mean, I think it illustrates the value of the setup that we have in Scotland in terms of the multi-partner advisory group for developing mountain biking in Scotland, and the partners around that table. I have absolute confidence they are willing and I think able to reach further and deeper into the retailers, the site managers, the plethora of ways that information about how, where to go when you're in a particular area, but also whilst you're doing that particular activity, key points to remember in terms of, leaving no trace and minimizing the negatives.
Great. And Phil, at sites, do you think we could improve those messagings to people at sites, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of this communication approach needs to always approach it from the user's perspective, rather than the site manager who wants to tell folks stuff. So we need to make sure that our messages are the things that people need to know and will benefit from. Rather than as I think you said earlier, Graham, just tell folks stuff. So I think if we're thinking about trail centres, if folk have started out in this COVID time, sort of riding a bike locally, what are the next steps? And I think the quality of the information on routes, what's the right route for them? How do we keep them safe? How do we make sure that they don't overstep themselves and think that there's suddenly a Danny McCaskill? I think the quality of trail information at trail centres needs to be increasingly targeted at new users, and realizing that this could be quite a foreign environment to them, make it easy for them to make the right choices for themselves rather than the wrong choices. And we've been working on this for a number of years. So, I mean, this is not massively new. It's probably just, as I say, further focused our minds on the importance of those entry-level users. So somebody rocks up at any of our trail centres, is it easy for them to, first off, is there something suitable for them there? So have they gone to the right place? So if they're starting to research where they should go, are they going to the right places? And once they've got there, is it easy for them to decide to take the right decisions? So, making blue trails attractive and sound attractive in the way that we promote them, rather than making people think that to have a great time they've got to start at red. That's the sort of thing I think we need to focus on. And of course, some of the best trail centres, have got some brilliant rides that people at every level can experience at, say, the blue level. And I think so that's really important. Keeping people safe, making it easy for them to make the right decisions that are right for them at their level. And if they have a good time there, they'll keep coming back and they'll gradually progress. If they have a bad experience at their first outing to one of these places, we've got concerns obviously for safety, but also, they're just not going to want to continue with the sport. So, I think the whole of the mountain bike community has got a bit of a role to play there as well in helping new users and remembering that all of us started somewhere. So looking after each other, It's a very welcoming community, the mountain bike community. But let's just remember, you know, that a little helping hand or a bit of advice or help from one of us that have been around in the sport for a long time to new users can make a world of difference to people's ongoing commitment.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks so much, folks. I mean, I'm getting a lot from this conversation myself as well. It definitely sparked off thoughts as well. I really do think it's right. Well, you're right. I think for ourselves, still, we'll have a responsibility to help educate people and help give good information. I think rather than educate people is probably better. Give good information to people so that they can make good choices. And I think you're right. I think we'll have a responsibility, and I think everybody who's listening will have a responsibility as well. Is that I think what I was taking from this as well is that really being quite user-centered with that. What are they looking for? What do they need to get? And also as well, I really like kind of that idea that we need to go to where those people are as well. What do they engage with? What's the media they engage with? What's the language they engage with? And who influences them as well? What are the influencers? And that will be a real mixed bag. And as things are, as we digest media in a more and more complex way, we need to be able to work across that complex landscape in a really good and targeted way. But that's going to take effort, it's going to take coordination, and it's going to take us all working together to do that. But I think that having this discussion, hopefully for attendees as well as myself and yourselves, we can find that this is a good starting place for this. It sparked off thoughts, and we can take that moving forward. So I just really like to thank you all for your time today. Hope you enjoy your lunch, which we got coming up now, and hopefully you enjoy the sessions in this afternoon. And thanks once again. Thank you.